Hello and welcome to Dining with Death, where we discuss infamous cases of death and murder that have an element of food to them, and then I cook or sample the food from the case. I'm Stacy Lee. Let's begin. How many ways are there to kill another person? A lot. There are a lot of ways. We human beings are, in reality, quite fragile, and there are a lot of ways to end us. Those of us in the true crime community know that there is one method of killing that appeals to women, especially when they want to kill someone who is close to them, and that method is poisoning. It's a particularly painful and gruesome way to die, which makes the sinister act all the more evil. Not only are they killing someone they are close to, someone who trusts them, but they're doing it slowly in a manner that causes the victim to suffer. The other thing we know about women who poison is that they often do it more than once, to more than one person in their care. This is Heather Mook. Heather was married to John Mook in 1997, and the couple made their home in York, England. John was Heather's third husband, and he was blissfully unaware of his new wife's disturbing history. In the early 1980s, Heather did something very sinister, something very shocking. She tried to poison her own 7-year-old daughter, Teresa, by crumbling antidepressants into the child's food. Heather was convicted of the crime, but in England, the statutes were somewhat lax, and before long, the crime was forgotten. Heather was then put on trial for the death of her 10-month-old. Authorities believed that she had tried to poison her second child, but at trial, it was ruled that the baby died of crib death, and Heather was set free. Whew, that's a lot of death surrounding one person, right? I mean, I wasn't there, and it was 1991, but not 1951. It's hard to believe that that was overlooked. In the winter of 2007, Heather's husband, John, fell ill. He was admitted to the hospital in January, confused, exhausted, and with a racing heart. The doctors were concerned and puzzled because they could not understand what was causing these unusual symptoms. They ran test after test on John, but initially nothing came back that would help them define John's rapid deterioration and illness. John was a 59-year-old bus driver. His wife, Heather, was 57 at the time. At one point, John became so ill that he was lying on the floor on a mattress in a state of total confusion, pretending to drive a bus. He couldn't answer questions, he didn't know where he was, and he could not function or do menial tasks. Again, John was admitted to the hospital, but this time, the doctors ran more conclusive tests. When the results came in, the doctors knew. John Mook was being poisoned. He had very high doses of the antidepressant drug amitriptyline, the brand name is Elavil, in his system. After a brief investigation, Heather Mook was arrested and charged with the poisoning and the attempted murder of her husband, John. As the story unfolded, people were shocked to learn just how deceitful and dangerous Heather Mook was, and that poisoning was far from her only crime. John knew that his wife had been in trouble with the law before, but for some reason, he was never told why. Maybe he didn't ask. He did not know that his wife had tried to kill her own daughter, that she had poisoned her own daughter, Teresa. After John and Heather were married, it became apparent that Heather wanted to live a life far out of their budget. She liked expensive things, and I'm not just talking about nice clothes or home goods. She wanted luxury cars and expensive vacations, things that a bus driver could not possibly afford to give her. And that's when Heather Mook started to scheme. We're always left asking the age-old question, why do they think they're going to get away with this? You never get away with this. I mean, you can't say never, okay, but it's not smart. It's not smart. Heather began a series of cons involving her friends and family members. On one occasion, she basically tricked some close friends into giving her more than £20,000. On another occasion, she conned a blank check out of a neighbor. I couldn't find details on exactly what she told the neighbor in order to get the check from them, but she took that check and ordered not one, not two, not three, but 6 brand new BMW cars, stating the fleet of vehicles was for an important businessman that she had dealings with. Heather Mook told other friends that she was planning to buy a hotel in Scarborough for £2.8 million and was then planning on spending another £2.2 million on renovations. This is not a very well publicized case, and I had a hard time finding out what in the world Heather Mook was telling people to believe that as a bus driver's wife, who she had odd jobs here and there, she was buying a $2.8 million hotel. Okay, Heather. I mean, we know that people can be really manipulative, and she must have been some kind of a con artist to have people believing she was even capable of getting the funds, or paying those funds back. And then on top of that, another 2.2 for renovations. I mean, that's wild. Then Heather was able to con 43,000 pounds from Frida Mook, her husband John's mother. Frida moved in with John and Heather and was living with them at the time Heather conned her. Heather somehow convinced the elderly woman that the money was needed to pay past bills at her residential nursing home, but that wasn't true at all. Those bills were already being paid from a separate account, and now Frida was living in the home with John and Heather. The investigators on the case were stunned as victim after victim came forward, telling them they had been conned out of money or merchandise by Heather Mook. But as good as Heather was, things were starting to crumble around her. Pressure was building to return the funds she had conned. Heather was dealing with it to a certain degree, but she knew there was one person she wouldn't be able to explain her behavior away to, and that was her husband, John. Heather knew when John found out she had conned his mother out of 43,000 pounds, it would be all over for her, and that's when she hatched a plan to get rid of John. For a series of weeks and then months, Heather Mook had been poisoning her husband John's food. Now the doctors knew it, then the police knew it, and soon everyone knew it. Heather went to trial, and her defense attorneys tried to make a case that Heather was under an enormous amount of stress. They even admitted that for a time, Heather was putting small quantities of rat poison in her husband's food, but that the quantity was not nearly enough to kill him. This woman is something else. We are all stressed, Heather. We are all under enormous stress. We are living in late capitalism, hellscape nightmare 2023. We're all stressed. You can't kill your husband. You can't steal money from people. The rat poison had caused John to become incoherent and then to act very strangely, which is how he ended up in the hospital the first time. The tests came back inconclusive, and doctors couldn't figure it out that initial visit. Then Heather decided to try poisoning her husband with a massive overdose of her prescribed antidepressant. For months, Heather tricked John into taking handfuls of pills, telling him the doctor had prescribed them for his, quote, condition, and that he needed to take them to recover. Finally, Heather crushed up a large handful of tablets and mixed them in with her homemade Bolognese sauce. She poured the sauce over spaghetti and fed it to her husband. Shortly thereafter, he was rushed to the hospital, and that is when doctors discovered he was being poisoned. It took the jury only 2.5 hours to find Heather Mook guilty of 2 counts of poisoning with intent to harm. She was sentenced to a psychiatric facility. Her husband John survived and has stated he feels lucky to be alive. After a sentencing review, the judge decided that psychiatric care was too lax for Heather Mook, and she was sentenced to prison. I couldn't find many articles dated after 2008 that talk about where Heather Mook is now. She could still be locked up, or she could be free. Europe has very different sentencing laws than we do here in the States, so she could be anywhere at this point. This is a dangerous woman and an evil woman who has no empathy nor compassion, even for the people she is supposed to love the most in this world. Let's hope wherever she is being monitored, or that at least the people around her know of her devious nature. And by the love of all that's holy, don't let her cook for you. Stay with me now. We are making Bolognese, my favorite pasta sauce, right now as we go dining with death. We are ready to cook. We're going to make an authentic Bolognese sauce. And you might be surprised not by what's in this recipe, but what's not in this recipe. As always, let's start with the prep work. We're going to start with carrots. Bolognese has a base of sofrito, which is carrot, onion, and celery. I ended up using 4 carrots instead of the 3 you see here, so the correct amount will be on my website. You're just going to cut those in half and then quarter them and slice them up into a small dice. 4 stalks of celery, same thing. Cut them in half the halves, so you've got quarters, and cut those up into a small dice. Now let's get an onion ready, and then we will have our sofrito. I used 2 small white onions. You're just going to give those a fine dice, and that's going to be the first thing. It's going in as the base of the sofrito. Now we are going to make what's called passata in Italy. If you can get these San Marzano tomatoes, they are phenomenal. You're going to take a can of those, the whole peeled tomatoes in the sauce, and blend them to make a liquid. And in Italian cooking, this is called a passata. No seeds, no skins, just a smooth tomato puree. Thicker than juice, not as thick as sauce. Now we're going to get a large pot. We're going to put about 1/3 cup of olive oil in the bottom, and we're going to start to cook and sweat that onion until it's nice and fragrant. I used about 1/3 cup of olive oil, really good quality olive oil. Add in those onions and cook them until they're sweet and fragrant. You can see here they're starting to caramelize just a little bit. Oh, it smells so good. Now you're going to add in your carrots and your celery, and that is your sofrito. Give that a good stir so everything's coated. Now, you're going to notice something, like I said earlier, that isn't in this recipe. There is no garlic. There is no rosemary. There is no thyme. Traditional Bolognese does not have garlic, rosemary, or thyme. You are going to add about 3/4 cup of red wine at this stage, and you're going to cook that until the alcohol is gone out of it. So it's quite dry, and you can no longer smell the alcohol. This is 1 pound of ground beef and 1 pound of pork each. High quality stuff from the butcher. Add that into the sofrito and the wine. And then I like to use this little tool. You can get these at the dollar store, and they are so handy. That little star on the end is so great for mashing anything up. Take that and just mince the mince and mix it all together. You want really small pieces. This sauce is quite homogeneous. Stir that all together. Isn't it looking gorgeous? This is where you can season a little bit of salt, a little bit of fresh cracked pepper. Beautiful, absolutely gorgeous base for a wonderful sauce. Give that a good stir, and when the liquid is almost gone like this, add another 3/4 cup of good red wine. Stir that again until the alcohol is gone out of it, until it's almost dry and you cannot smell the wine. Now let's talk tomato paste. This is the stuff I like. It's a little more expensive. I get it on Amazon. It is the most brightly flavored, delicious tomato sauce, and I like to fry my tomato sauce. I always put it in first, so it's in with the drier ingredients, and that way the sugars in the tomato sauce caramelize, and it gives you the most wonderful, rich tomato flavor. Isn't that beautiful? Starting to look a little bit more like sauce now with a little red color. Now we're going to add our passata. I added 2 cups of passata. And then after stirring it, obviously, I put a little water in the container and made sure I got all of that beautiful passata out of my container. And this sauce also needs some water. And you're going to add another can of whole peeled tomatoes and the water from that can as well. I used about 1/2 can of water. All these measurements will be on the website. Take your little tool and give it a mash. You want to break those tomatoes up. You don't want any big chunks. Again, this is quite a smooth sauce. I always add a pinch of sugar to any tomato sauce that I make. I was taught to do that, and I feel like it makes a difference. I'm going to put in a little bit of bay leaf here, and that's about it. This is a very simple sauce that is all about the quality of ingredients and the time. You're going to now put it on low heat so it's bubbling just a little bit like this, and it is going to cook, my friends, for 3 or 4 hours. That's all up to you, but the longer it cooks, the more tender it will become. Get some good pasta for this recipe. This is a $7 package of pasta, and let me tell you, it was worth it. If you're going to go to 4 hours worth of work, get you some good pasta. There is a difference. I don't care what you say. There is a difference between the better, more expensive pasta. We're getting close now. You can see it has reduced down almost 2.5 inches, and it's thick and it is fragrant. It is sweet. It's bubbling. The meat is so tender it melts in your mouth. And this is where you add the key ingredient to Bolognese, milk. Bolognese has milk. I added a cup of vitamin D, whole milk. You stir that in and you get that beautiful pink color Bolognese is famous for. It is 4.5 hours later, and you gotta have patience with Bolognese. Let's plate up a bowl of this delicious dish. You're gonna put some sauce on the bottom of the dish. Jace is upstairs with my little granddaughters, you can hear him. You're gonna add your spaghetti. In this case, really should be pappardelle. And then you're gonna add more sauce on top. So good, right? To finish it off, of course, we've got some good Parmesan cheese. Takes a lot of time, but it's worth the wait. Yeah. This is not your strong flavors, lots of garlic and herb pasta sauce. This is very subtle. It's all about the sofrito and it's all about the tomatoes. It really makes a difference when you fry the tomato paste like I did. It just, those caramelized sugars, you really, really can taste them. They have a different flavor than the rest of the tomatoes. Yeah, this is so good. I might eat it even if it had poison in it. Thank you for joining me today on Dining with Death. Hit that like button if you liked the video and subscribe to my channel if you want to support me. Of course, you can also join my Patreon, and the end goal there is to raise money to donate to police departments that have cold case DNA in storage that cannot be tested because there is no money to test it. We want our community to be able to donate to that cause, and you can help for a few dollars a month if that's what you want to give. Stay safe, my friends, and be kind to each other, and I'll see you next time on Dining with Death. Bye.